again flung out one hand in the contemptuous gesture with which one would brush away a troublesome fly. But this time Gordon was more cautious. He neatly dodged the stranger's blow, then swung a vicious right squarely for the adversary's unprotected jaw. The blow smashed solidly home with all of Gordon's weight behind it. The stranger's jaw buckled and gave beneath that shattering impact. Then abruptly his entire face crumpled into distorted ruin. Gordon staggered back a step in sheer horror at the gruesome result of his blow. The stranger flung a hand up to his shattered features. When his hand came away again, his whole face came away with it. Gordon had one horror-stricken glimpse of a featureless blob of rubbery bluish-gray flesh, in which fiendish eyes of a blue-green fire blazed in malignant fury. Then the stranger fumbled at his collar, ripping the linen swiftly away. Something lashed out from beneath his throat. A loathsome, snake-like object, slender and forked at the end. For one ghastly moment, as the writhing tentacle swung into line with him, Gordon saw its forked ends glow strange fire, one a vivid blue, the other a sparkling green. Then the world was abruptly blotted out for Blair Gordon. Consciousness returned to Gordon as swiftly and painlessly as it had left him. For a moment he blinked stupidly in a dazed effort to comprehend the incredible scene before him. He was seated in a chair over near the wall of a large room that was flooded with livid red light from a single globe overhead. Beside him sat Leah Keith, also staring with dazed eyes in an effort to comprehend her surroundings. Directly in front of them stood a figure of stark, nightmarish horror. The weirdly glowing eyes identified the figure as that of the stranger at the Morai hut, but there every point of resemblance ceased. Only the cleverest of facial masks and body padding could ever have enabled this monstrosity to pass unnoticed in the world of normal human beings. Now that his disguise was completely stripped away, his slight frame was revealed as a grotesque parody of that of a human being, with arms and legs like pipe stems, a bald oval head that merged with necklace rigidity directly into a heavy-shouldered body that tapered into an almost wasp-like slenderness at the waist. He was naked save for a loin-cloth made of some metallic fabric. His bluish-gray skin had a dull, oily sheen strangely suggestive of fine-grained, flexible metal. The creature's face was hideously unlike anything human. Beneath the glowing eyes was a small, circular mouth, with a cluster of gill-like appendages on either side of it. Patches of lighter-colored skin on either side of his head seemed to serve as ears. From a point just under the head, where the throat of a human being would have been, dangled the foot-and-a-half long tentacle, whose forked tip had set Gordon into oblivion. Behind the creature, Gordon was dimly aware of a maze of complicated and utterly unfamiliar apparatus, ranged along the opposite wall, giving the room the appearance of being a laboratory of some kind. Gordon's obvious bewilderment seemed to amuse the bluish-gray monstrosity. "May I introduce myself?" he asked, with a mocking tone in his metallic voice. "I am Arlok, of Xoran. I am an explorer of space, and more particularly an opener of gates. My home is upon Xoran, which is one of the 11 major planets that circle about the giant blue-white sun that your astronomers call Rigel. I am here to open the gate between your world and mine." Gordon reached a reassuring hand over to Leah. All memory of their quarrel was obliterated in the face of their present peril. He felt her slender fingers twine firmly around his. The warm contact gave them both new courage. "We of Xoran need your planet and intend to take possession of it," Arlok continued. "But the vast distance which separates Rigel from your solar system makes it impractical to transport any considerable number of people here in space cars, for though our space cars travel with practically the speed of light, it requires over 540 years for them to cross that great void. So I was sent, a lone pioneer to your Earth, to do the work necessary here in order to open the gate that will enable Xoran to cross the border in less than a minute of your time. That gate is the one through the 4th dimension, for Xoran and your planet in a 4-dimensional universe are almost touching each other, in spite of the great distance separating them in a 3-dimensional universe. We of Xoran, being 3-dimensional creatures like you Earthlings, cannot even exist in a 4-dimensional plane, but we can, by the use of apparatus to open a gate, pass through a thin sector of the 4th dimension and emerge in a far distant part of our 3-dimensional universe. The situation of our two worlds," Arlok continued, "is somewhat like that of two dots on opposite ends of a long strip of paper that is curved almost into a circle. The 2-dimensional beings capable only of realizing and traveling along the 2 dimensions of the paper itself, those dots may be only a few feet apart. Yet in the third dimension, straight across free space, they might be separated only by a thousandth part of an inch. In order to take that shortcut across the third dimension, the two-dimensional creatures of the paper would have only to transform a small strip of the intervening space into a two-dimensional surface like their paper. They could do this, of course, by the use of proper vibration-creating machinery, for all things in a material universe are merely a matter of vibration. We of Xoran planned to cross the barrier of the fourth dimension by creating a narrow strip of vibrations powerful enough to exactly match and nullify those of the fourth dimension itself. The result will be that this narrow strip will temporarily become an area of 3 dimensions, an area over which we can safely pass from our world to yours. Arlok indicated one of the pieces of apparatus along the opposite wall of the room. It was an intricate arrangement of finely wound coils, with wires leading to the scores of needle-like points, which constantly shimmered and crackled with tiny blue-white flames. Thick cables ran to a bank of concave reflectors of some gleaming grayish metal. There is the apparatus which will supply the enormous power necessary to nullify the vibrations of the fourth-dimensional barrier, Arlok explained. It is a condenser and adapter of the cosmic force that you call the Milkaean rays. In Xoran, a similar apparatus is already set up and finished, but the gate can only be opened by simultaneous actions from both sides of the barrier. That is why I was sent on my long journey through space to do the necessary work here. I am now nearly finished. A very few hours more will see the final opening of the gate. Then the fighting hordes of Xoran will sweep through the barrier and overcome your planet. When the gate from Xoran to a new planet is first opened, Arlok continued, our scientists always like to have at least one pair of specimens for the new world's inhabitants sent through to them for experimental use. So tonight, while waiting for one of my final castings to cool, I improved the time by making a brief raid upon the place that you call the Morai Hut. The lady here seemed an excellent type of your earthling women, and the meteoric iron in her necklace made a perfect focus for electric hypnosis. Her escort was too inferior a specimen to be of value to me, so I killed him when he attempted to interfere. When you gave chase, I lured you on until I could see whether or not you might be useful. You proved an excellent specimen, so I merely stunned you. Very soon now I shall be ready to send the two of you through the gate to our scientists in Xoran. A cold wave of sheer horror swept over Gordon. It was impossible to doubt the stark and deadly menace promised in the plan of this grim visitor from an alien universe. A menace that loomed not only for Gordon and Leah, but for the teeming millions of a doomed and defenseless world. "Let me show you Xoran," Arlok offered. "Then you may be better able to understand." He turned his back carelessly upon his two captives, and strode over to the apparatus along the opposite wall. Gordon longed to hurl himself upon the unprotected back of the retreating Xorian. Any attempt of that kind would be suicidal. Arlok's deadly tentacle would strike him down before he was halfway across the room. He searched his surroundings with desperate eyes for anything that might serve as a weapon. Then his pulse quickened with sudden hope. There, on a small table near Leah, was the familiar bulk of a .45 caliber revolver, loaded and ready for use. It was included in a miscellaneous collection of other small earthly tools and objects that Arlok had collected for study. There was an excellent chance that Leah might be able to secure the gun unobserved. Gordon pressed her fingers in a swift attempt at signaling, then jerked his head ever so slightly toward the table. A moment later the quick answering pressure of Leah's fingers told him that she had understood his message. From the corner of his eye, Gordon saw Leah's other hand begin cautiously groping behind her for the revolver. Then both Gordon and Leah froze into sudden immobility as Arlok faced them again, from beside an apparatus slightly reminiscent of an earthly radio set. Arlok threw a switch, and a small bank of tubes glowed pale green. A yard-square plate of bluish-gray metal on the wall above the apparatus glowed with milky fluorescence. "It is easy to penetrate the barrier with light waves," Arlok explained. "That is a gate that can readily be opened from either side. It was through it that we first discovered your Earth." Arlok threw a rheostat on to more power. The luminous plate cleared swiftly. "And there, Earthlings, is Xoran," Arlok said proudly. Leah and Gordon gasped in sheer amaze as the glowing plate became a veritable window into another world, a world of utter and alien terror. The livid light of a giant red sun blazed mercilessly down upon a landscape from which every vestige of animal and plant life had apparently been stripped. Naked rocks and barren soil stretched illuminably to the far horizon in a vast monotony of utter desolation. Arlok twirled the knob of the apparatus, and another scene flashed into view. In this scene, great gleaming squares and cones of metal rose in towering clusters from the starkly barren land. Hordes of creatures like Arlok swarmed in and around the metal buildings. Giant machines whirled countless wheels in strange tasks. From 1,000 great needle-like projections